Hello, welcome to Kevin Kern's Always Pick Last, Chapter 9 now. Okay. The doorbell rang. Kevin, can you get it? Mum's voice rang out from her bedroom. I peeked out the window before I went to the door, as had been my habit for months now. The man had his back to me, but at least I knew it wasn't one of the neighborhood bullies. Uncle Henry? I didn't know he was coming over. Come on in. Uncle Henry wiped his feet on the mat before he came into the house. I see you're painting the back porch. My eyes flew to his face. What else had he seen? The last thing I needed was for word to get out among the family that I had the butt of all the neighborhood jokes. Yeah, I thought I'd help Mum out. Uncle Henry nodded but didn't say anything. He just seemed to be waiting. You want to sit down or something? I wasn't used to playing host. Dad had always done this, and if not Dad, then Mum. I felt strangely uncomfortable under Uncle Henry's steady gaze. Can I get you a glass of water? Uncle Henry shook his head. No thanks. I'm fine, but I'll take a seat in here. As I walked into the living room, I turned on the television as I usually did after a confrontation with one of my bullies. Television had become my escape. I sat down in my toy box as Uncle Henry sat in Dad's chair. He looked good in it. Even though they weren't related, Uncle Henry and Dad shared a lot of the same features, and it made me feel good just to be in the same room with him. So, Kevin, I was driving by just a little while ago, and it looked like you and the other boy were having a confrontation. Confrontation. I didn't say anything. Didn't dare breathe. What was I to say? I knew Mum had been keeping my problems a secret. In Irish Catholic families, you don't breathe a word of your problems to anyone. Ever. Uncle Henry seemed prepared to wait as long as it took. His eyes held mine, but they weren't threatening or mocking. They didn't reflect the fear and confusion I saw in Mum's eyes whenever I came in, either cursing or crying after I'd been attacked yet again. So, Kevin, what's going on with you? Nice. An open-ended question. The kind that requires a bit of thought. What did he want me to say? This was making me feel like I was feeling a pop quiz in history class. After my silence stretched far beyond anything that might have been civil, Uncle Henry squared his shoulders and just came out with it. I saw that kid push you around and then push your hands into the paint. Well, now, isn't this just great? Now my abject humiliation could just make the rounds of the family. Mum had managed to keep it quiet this long, but that couldn't last. Kevin, I think that you need some help standing up to these kids. My eyes popped open. I hadn't expected understanding and compassion. Even though it was just Uncle Henry, I'd expected to be told to stand up for myself, to punch them in the nose, in my dad's words. To my horror, my eyes filled with tears and I pushed them away with impatient hands. I let out a great sigh and said, Dad said I should just punch them in the mouth. Uncle Henry's lips twisted into a quirky grin, but he controlled that very quickly. And most of the time, I'd say he was right. What you're going through is the same thing a lot of boys go through. Growing up, Meal is a pretty tough road. I had my share of being bullied. What? Uncle Henry bullied? No way. Uncle Henry smiled at my expression. Yeah, I was the butt of every joke for miles until the summer between 10th and 11th grade. I shot up over a foot and I put on a lot of muscle mass because I was doing manual labor that summer. In 11th grade, no one dared cross me. Was it really that easy? That simple? But I was years away from being in 11th grade. I wasn't sure I was even going to survive the coming school year. I didn't punch Dawn in the nose, but I did try to stand up for myself. I saw that, Kevin. I was real proud of you. If it had been me, I would probably have chucked the whole can of peanut at him. But then you would have had to explain to your mum why you needed more paint to finish the job. We laughed together. For one of the first times since Dad died, I felt uneasy uh, car- uh, camaraderie with a male role model. Uncle Henry. How do I get these idiots to stop picking on me? There, I'd said it out loud. I'd asked for help. Not that I hadn't been asking Mum for help, but it was totally obvious. She was just out of her element, that I'd only asked her as my shield by having lunch with her every day for the past few weeks. Uncle Henry pulled out a newspaper ad from his pocket. I'd been looking at this place. They teach things like karate. It's called a martial arts studio. I just wondered if this might be a good thing for you to try. I looked at the black and white ad that Uncle Henry had in his hand. The figures reminded me of Big Jim with their muscles and poise that they stood on one foot and had the other foot kick out as if defending themselves against the foe. This was exactly what I needed, but I knew Mum couldn't afford the class fees. She could barely pay for our house and the food we ate. I wondered if I doubled my paper route, I might be able to manage the cost of the classes. Uncle Henry interrupted my thoughts. I never gave you a birthday present. No, the chain was your Auntie D's idea. I just couldn't settle on something that was just right. My hand reached up and grasped Dad's ring, hanging at the end of the chain Auntie D had given me at the beginning of the summer. So, if you're interested, Uncle Henry paused and looked very intently at me. In taking these classes, I would like to pay for them as my birthday gift to you. What do you say? What did I say? Inside my head, I said, Hell yes! Please teach me how to beat the crap out of Dom Blaylock and Tony Capodini of this world. I wanted to beat the shit out of everyone who had ever been hurt me. But I knew I couldn't say that to Uncle Henry, so I copied his manner and just nodded, as if I were still considered his offer. That might work for me. Well then, Kevin, let me know when you're ready. With that, Uncle Henry got up and headed to the front door. Wait, don't tell me you don't want to talk to Mum. Uncle Henry had never come over just to talk to me. In fact, he'd never come over without Aunt Dee. Something was up. No, Kev, I came to talk to you. Let me know what you decide. And with that, Uncle Henry left, and I was left wondering if I had just experienced a Cinderella moment with Uncle Henry as my fairy godfather. I picked up the newspaper clipping he had left behind. As I read and reread it, Mum came out of her bedroom. If I didn't know better, I'd say she had been there listening the whole time Uncle Henry had been there. Uncle Henry just offered to give me martial arts lessons on my late birthday present. That's nice. Mum pretended to be only vaguely interested, but now I could see how much she wanted this to work for me. Someone to somehow protect me in a way she couldn't. What what did you say? I told him I would think about it. Parlin High was about a mile from my house, just down the street from Everett High. Again, I carefully chose my route, avoiding the projects on Cherry Street and keeping my distance from other kids from the neighborhood walking the same direction. Every step I took, I wondered if I would feel different, if I knew how to defend myself. No. Truth be told, I was a lot more interested in beating them up than in defending myself. Before I even got to school after the first day, I had decided I was going to take the lessons. Anything was better than this gut-wrenching fear I felt every time I left my house. School flew by my first day. I don't know if word got around that I'd stood up to Don Blaylock, or if everyone was just too busy sorting out where their classes and lockers were that they didn't have time to mess with me. But I made it through the day unscathed. I headed over to Mum's office because that was now my habit. What are you doing here, Kevin? Mum looked surprised to see me. I figured hang out here until it's time for you to go home. Mum looked away from me, fiddling with some papers on her desk. Her lack of response was odd. Finally, she spoke. Kevin, I don't think this is such a good idea anymore. You're 13 now, and it's time for you to stand up on your own 2 feet. Did I hear her correctly? Was she removing my one safe haven from my tormentors? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She was throwing me to the wolves. Kevin, it's not like that. Mum could always read my face these days. It's just that it doesn't look good. You coming over here to avoid spending time with your friends. They're not my friends anymore. I'm sure once you work things out, you'll be friends again. I turned away from her in disgust. She was cutting me loose. It was now just me against the world. I left her office and stormed home, anger in every single step. I cooled off by the time I got home. I'd made my decision. Called on Uncle Henry. I want to do it. Great. I'll come right over and pick you up. We'll get you enrolled today. True to his word, Uncle Henry came right over and we headed over to United Studios in Everett Square. Funny thing, it was just a few doors down from Gino's Pizza. I was still smarting from Mum's refusal to let me hide her out at her office until it was time for me to come home. But deep down I knew she was doing the right thing. I really did need to figure out how to stand up for myself, but the thought terrified me. I was nervous, clear down to my toes. What if I couldn't do this either? I was rotten at sports and everyone knew it. What if the karate instructors took one look at me and just started laughing? When we walked up to the doors of the studio, a big part of me wanted to check it out, but I hid those feelings from Uncle Henry. I didn't need him thinking I was a tool. I was a total wimp. Paul Taylor met us, and immediately I liked him. He wasn't one of those teachers who sizes you up and finds you wanting. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Do you want to learn karate?" Of course I did. Why else was I here? But as a kid, you pretty much don't say anything to an adult that might make him think I was a smart aleck. To save time and my misunderstandings, I just nodded my head. Great, let's go over the things you'll need to get started. Paul and Uncle Henry went over the options and we decided that I would begin a once a week class on Wednesdays. 2 days away, I did a uniform, a white gi and a white belt. I knew a little something about belts and karate. Big Jim was a black belt and I knew that that was my goal. I decided not to say anything to Paul yet. Once all the paperwork had been signed and Uncle Henry and I walked out of the karate studio, I began to have my usual doubts. What if I couldn't manage to do what I was supposed to do? What if, as usual, I failed? Maybe it would be better to save Uncle Henry's money and my own sanity and back out now. Yet, every time I started to bring up my doubts to Uncle Henry, he managed to divert me, and before the afternoon was over, I had a brand new gi. I'd been I'd been signed up for classes, and Uncle Henry had a look on his face like a kid on Christmas. Well, Kevin, I think you're about ready to start a new phase of your life. He could say that again. New phase indeed. To learn karate meant I might actually have some kind of a fighting chance to finally stand up for myself. I'd no longer have to be the butt of everyone's joke. I wouldn't be the last one chosen for a game. For one of the first times in my life, I began to feel optimism that there might be an answer for my inability to blend in with the crowd. For Tony, it was sports. As for me, maybe, just maybe, it was karate. Karate. All I could hope was that it would be my saving grace. After signing me up, Uncle Henry it saw to it that I got a brand new white gi, my karate uniform, a white belt, and a canvas bag to carry everything. My classes were held immediately after school on Wednesdays. That Wednesday, instead of trying to get Mum to let me hang out around for a couple of hours, I went directly to the karate studio. The entrance was your typical double glass doors, looking much like any commercial shop in the area. It was when you entered the environment changed. The foyer was designed for peace. I was to bow when I entered, indicating that I was leaving all my outside cares out where they belonged. I made a quick, requisite nod of my head, did a quick change in the locker room, and arrived at the mat ready for class. Paul Taylor, my sensei or instructor, was a powerful looking man with a black gi and a corresponding black belt. If I hadn't met him when Uncle Henry had signed me up, I would have been horribly intimidated by him. But because I'd sensed a peace and a sense of kindness in him, I came to my first class a little cautious, but determined to do my best. Paul's method of teaching was designed to give every student the opportunity to succeed. If I made a mistake, he didn't give me impatient glare. Instead, he would calmly say, "Try again, Kevin." I couldn't believe that it was truly that simple, but his gentle encouragement made me want to try even harder to do well. By the end of class, I was completely worn out, but elated. To my friends, I probably still sucked at sports, but to me, I had found a teacher and an environment where it didn't hurt to make mistakes. This time, when I left, I bowed with a little more attention to the idea of leaving what occurred on the mat and leaving what was in my outside life outside. What I couldn't do, however, was forget how much I enjoyed my first class. That night, when I went to sleep, for the first time since Dad died, I had something to smile about before I closed my eyes. My entire life was structured around my Wednesday karate class. I wasn't as aware of people teasing me or bullying me unless they actually punched me or knocked me down. I suspect that my lack of fear took a little of the fun out of it for my tormentors. They had to step things up in order to get my goat. I'd managed to save enough from my paper route to buy myself a Barracuda jacket. It cost me 45 bucks, and Mum was happy that I had come up with the money because she just couldn't squeeze that much out of her budget. I wore that jacket to school with great pride. I felt like I fit in a little better because anyone was wearing a similar jacket. Tommy Mason decided that I was walking around the school just a little too carefree for his comfort. In my world, you were a bully's right-hand man, or one of the bullied. Tommy, because he was a really big kid, fit the bully bill pretty well. His horrible temper sealed the deal. When Tommy got mad, he would turn so red, you would think his head would just pop. But this accompanied by such a terrifying, crazy rage, it really wasn't funny at all. One day in shop class, I was wearing my Barracuda jacket and happened to catch Tommy looking at me. Quickly, I averted my eyes, but I wasn't fast enough. What are you looking at, huh? A chill went down my spine. I just knew he was gunning for me. Thinking that he couldn't possibly do anything in class, I kept my back to him and continued working on my project. The rapt attention of everyone around me on their particular projects told me that Tommy had come over to our table. I wanted to shudder, but couldn't show weakness. He punched my shoulder from behind, knocking the paintbrush out of my hand, and I saw, to my dismay, that some of the paint had gotten on my new jacket. I still refused to turn around and face Tommy. The truth was, I was absolutely terrified. Our shop teacher had stepped out of the room and absolutely no one was going to come to my aid. Before I could anticipate his intentions, Tommy grabbed my can of paint and appended it all over my jacket. Are you going to do something? Huh, loser? He taunted me to the sound of muffled laughter from all the other uneasy boys in the room. They were all just glad he hadn't chosen to pick on them. Of course, I wasn't going to do anything. Tommy was a wall of human flesh. I was a good foot and a half shorter than he was. No, I couldn't do anything but see deep down inside. I grabbed towels and kept the worst of the paint off the floor. But my jacket was ruined. The anger that was born after my father died was beginning to affect me like a cancer. I seethed with impotent rage. I wasn't going to cry, not in front of him, but I just wanted to turn on him and beat the crap out of him. What had startled as a small ember deep inside me was beginning to grow. I was actually afraid of the white hot lava like anger that I knew could result from all the internalized rage. For a moment I went back to my old thoughts that I had no purpose in this world other than being a punching bag for bullies like Tommy. This had been going on for so long it just seemed normal, and yet I knew it wasn't right. The snickers stopped when Mr. Carver re-entered the room, but the bell rang right after that, so he never knew why there was a spattering of paint on the floor by my workstation in shop class. He never asked me either. That night, I went to sleep with a new goal. I was going to become so good at karate that no one would ever bully me again. I had murder in my heart that night, and I believed that learning martial arts would be my weapon. At my next karate class, I entered, bowed, and prepared for class with great determination. That's when I noticed Tony. He came through the double doors without bowing. He was already wearing a white gi and white belt, and in case I made my mistake about his purpose for being there, he came right up beside me, gave me a punch in the shoulder, and said, "Hi, Kev." My stomach clenched in on itself. This could not be happening. This was my outlet, my secret weapon, my way out of a life of torment. I was perilously close to tears when Paul Taylor entered the room. Yet I'd been to enough classes that I knew the routine. I entered his bow and readied myself for class. I don't know if Paul knew of my history with Tony or not, but magically he seemed to sense that having Tony right next to me would be my undoing. He had Tony change places with another boy so that he was out of my line of vision. Again, once class started, I had only eyes and thoughts for the instruction. I wobbled a few times and a new kick or pose, and I'm pretty sure I heard Tony snicker. But I managed to stay focused on what I needed to do to get that look of approval I so dearly needed from my instructor. As Paul taught us the moves, kicks, and blocks, he also taught us the principle of karate by honoring ourselves and others. I really wanted to believe everything he was saying about how learning the key principles of karate would shape me into the best version of myself. Within the first few weeks, I learned that if I put both my physical and mental effort into my practice, I would improve. Today, however, Paul was focusing on other aspects of the philosophy of karate. Here you will learn the code of karate etiquette. However, you will not leave what you learn here. You will carry it with you and honor its principles at home, at school, and at work. I sure wanted to know if Tony was listening, but I didn't dare look at him. Paul was still talking. You must have control over your impulses at all times. This means that you will practice self control in all aspects of your life. This means you must focus to any task at hand and make sure you finish what you begin. Paul's words seemed to be designed specifically for me. When I saw Tony enter the dojo, I wanted to quit immediately. But looking at the fire in Paul's eyes, seeing the passion he had for his love of teaching karate, reinforced my determination to finish what I started. I would learn karate. October blesses Everett with a blaze of gold and orange and red, and this year was no exception. I'd stopped visiting my dad on a daily basis as I no longer had the time. I made sure to stop by for a chat at least once a week. Today I was on my way to St. Teresa's for catechism class. I left early so that I could stop by the cemetery on my way to church. I got down on my knees and brushed away the fallen leaves from Dad's gravestone. There were no flowers there today, and part of me wished I had thought to bring some. But looking overheard at the colourful canopy of trees, I realised that God had given Dad a far more colourful bouquet than I could ever have. My conversation with Dad that day was more about what I was learning in karate. It made me proud to be able to tell Dad that I'd advanced to the point where I was now able to spar with other people in my class. As a beginner, I had learned the basic stances, balance, blocks, kicks, and straight punches done as a kata, or a series of karate techniques done in specific order. Once I arrived, advanced, I was able to actually begin sparring with my classmates, and this, for me, was extremely exciting. This past week, I had managed to block my opponent's kicks and punches exactly as I had been taught, and then with what still think was a lucky break, I managed to knock him down in the spirit of our dojo. I immediately gave him a hand up, and then we bowed at one another, indicating mutual respect. I didn't speak out loud much at Dad's gravesite anymore. I began to just have conversations with him in my head, no matter where I was. Maybe that was why my visits to the cemetery had become less frequent. I was really glad that I hadn't been talking out loud as I heard familiar voices coming my way. Tony, and Dave Braden, and Don Blaylock. My favourite trio. Tony spotted me first. "Hey, Kevin, what's your dad got to say today?" Jerk, I thought. I quickly got to my feet and turned to face them, saying nothing. They were heading to St. Teresa's as well as we were all in the same confirmation class together. There were days I really wished I could move to a different neighborhood, but that simply wasn't my reality. We'd lived on Dartmouth Street for a very long time, and Mum was not in a position to move anywhere else. I was trapped with my neighborhood tormentors until I graduated high school. I felt the familiar buzz of anxiety and anger inside of me. These three weren't here to be friendly today. Some days they actually behaved pretty well, but Tony had been kicked out of the karate studio for misbehaving. He had bullied one of the younger students, and Paul Taylor immediately booted him out the door. I'd been there that day and witnessed Tony's humiliating ejection from the dojo. I'd been very, very happy that day, but I don't think I let it show in my face. Today, however, I could tell by the look on Tony's face that he was still smarting and intended to take it out on me. Without even realizing it, I took a well-balanced karate stance designed to protect myself from attack. When Tony came at me with a kick, I deflected it, and then with a swift turn of my hand, twisted his foot and swiped his other leg out with a quick move of my leg, and he fell to the grass with a thud. He scattered dried leaves in his haste to get up. I didn't like the look in his eyes, and if he'd come at me again, I think I would have been pounded within an inch of my life. Something on my own face must have gotten through to him, because instead of relaunching an attack, he turned to Dave and Don and said, "Come on, let's get going." I watched the trio walk toward the church and leave me in a daze. "Well, what do you know, Dad? It worked." I followed Tony and the two other boys to church, where we sat for an hour in our boredom in desks designed for much smaller bodies than ours. The entire time I wasn't listening to F.R. Walsh at all. I was marveling that I'd finally bested one of my bullies, and I'd lived to talk about it. I could hardly control the grin on my face. And that's that for chapter 9 of Kevin Kearns Always Pick Last.